So we've got a new product that came in pretty recently, the Fujikura Speeder NX green. Now we're going to do a bit of a comparison between the blue, which has been out for probably 18 months or so, and to the green, which is what it calls the newer model. So the principle behind the Speeder NX, actually I'll have to show you the two products because that would clearly be useful to see what they look like. So we've got the blue on the bottom and the green on the top. So the main principles of these shafts, they've got variable torque core. So what Fujikura have managed to do is develop materials so they can have different torque values at different parts of the shaft. And what that allows them to do is to look at the stiffness profiles, but also manipulate the feel and not lose the feel aspect. And that's one of the biggest keys of these two shafts is how smooth the feel is between the two models. So with the blue, what they've done is we've got a lower torque in the handle end and the tip end, and that stabilizes, so reduces a little bit of the rotational movement. So, and that's really what torque is. So those that's just a sort of word you hear often. Torque is the amount of resistance to twisting. So the lower the number, the less the amount of movement, and the higher number, the more the movement. So these ones have both got torque of 3.7 and 3.8. So actually the green, as we'll come on to in a minute, is slightly higher torque. And a higher torque shaft where it has a little bit more rotational give in the shaft will tend to feel a little bit smoother, a little bit softer. And if you go very low torque, it basically feels really tight and a little bit stiffer. So it tends to kind of play and feel stiffer to profile, the lower torque, and plays and feels a little bit softer to profile, the higher the torque number. So the real principles of this shaft, the blue's been a really successful shaft for, say, very smooth feel. It's a very even balance through the shaft as well, but keeps a bit of kick in the midsection, and by virtue of the stiffer torque in the handle and the grip end, handle and the head end, it retains that little bit of feeling of control. The lower torque in the tip helps the recovery of the shaft and the stability of the head through impact. So it helps the consistency of dynamic loft and face angle is the sort of principle of the design through impact. So what I'm going to hit a couple of shots with the blue, and then what we'll do is I'll switch it out, hit a couple with the green. We'll describe the differences in the green just to give you an idea of what they do and why one might suit one player more than the other. So blue series, they're very much mid-launch shafts, actually, both of them. So this isn't designed to be a kind of Ventus-like performance. One of their other shafts with Fujikura, the Ventus with the Velocore, very, very stable material in the tip, really brings that spin down. This isn't designed to be that way. This is very much more kind of smoother feel, a little bit more kick, and a little bit more of a mid-launch shaft. So I'll hit a couple with the blue. So as a shaft, the initial impressions you get, quite a tight feel through impact. Now I caught that one a little bit higher on the face, but what you don't get, and this is where the lower torque material helps, what you don't get is that feeling of the head twisting and giving and slewing around on you. It actually feels really quite tight and stable through impact. But because as a shaft it's a little bit softer through the midsection, you get that sensation of as you start down, you get a little bit of feedback through that midsection. It's not kind of rigid and dead. You get that little bit of pop and kick and a bit of smoothness through it. So for someone who wants to feel the shaft give you something back, but then not feel loose down the bottom end, that's where a shaft like this is a really great shaft. So you say quite stable through impact, but a little bit of pop and kick through the midsection. So it tends to suit someone who's got more of a kind of a smoother transfer of energy, a smoother acceleration, rather than someone who's got a kind of real kind of sharp change of direction. If you have that sharper change, you might feel like the shaft's a little bit loose, a little bit going to give out on you a little bit. Structure, it's still very stable, but it's going to tend to work well for someone who's a smooth load of the shaft. And anyone who knows Lewis, who coaches here, he's got one of the most pretty beautiful swings, but it's a sort of that lazy tempo, lazy speed, you might call it. He still swings it very fast, but that's where this shaft, partly the weight position, he uses the 70X in this, but one, it doesn't get tip heavy, so it doesn't get stuck behind him, but that sort of smooth acceleration profile, you get that little bit of responsiveness back from the shaft without it being unstable. So I'll then move into the greens. So the differentiation on the green series is designed to feel that little bit tighter, a little bit stiffer. So where the blue gives that responsive I go back to the word smooth, responsive, a little bit of kick, a little bit of pop to the swing. You know, the green from a design point of view, it's actually slightly softer in the handle. There's a little bit more torque to it, and it's a slightly softer grip end. So what that means is that gives a little bit more feedback under the hands when you change direction. It keeps a little bit of load, a little bit more load in the handle of the shaft. And that's really important on this one because they've strengthened up the midsection of the shaft. If they didn't soften the butt section, that would then make it feel a lot firmer. So it would feel kind of a little bit more rigid all the way through. So what you tend to find is a shaft that's very stable and very strong through that mid to lower midsection. As they've done on this one, it's very slightly softer in the butt end to keep a little bit of feedback so it doesn't feel like a plank. And they've retained a very similar stiffness in the tip. So because they do want this to be a little bit, you know, design-wise, a little bit lower launch, a little bit lower spin. If you then soften the tip up, you're then going to increase the spin back up again. So this one, it's still the weight profile and the balance. The green's 2 grams heavier than the blue, but the balance profile is very, very similar from green to blue. So actually, in terms of the way they move, they stay very similar. But the green technically is going to produce a slightly lower launch, certainly a slightly firmer feel, and in theory, a slightly lower spin. So you can definitely feel the pickup's just a little bit heavier. But it's certainly, now I've just spooned that right, but it's certainly a crisper feel through the shaft. So what you get from the blue is that little bit of a load, a little bit of a pop without the looseness at the bottom. This one, as I say, not dead because the grip end's softer, but noticeably a little bit firmer all the way through. So it feels like you can load it a little bit more. A player that has a slightly more aggressive acceleration pattern is probably going to feel this shaft hangs on a little bit tighter. So it definitely, for someone who's slightly more aggressive in their swing, this shaft's going to feel a little more comfortable. So it feels like the shaft stands up to being loaded a little bit more. So whereas the first one I got underneath a little bit, that last shot, I struck a little bit better. Spin-wise, for me, the blue actually spun slightly better, and that probably goes with being slightly stiffer in the handle and having the torsional rigidity in the tip. This shaft, from an action point of view, because I've always had a little bit more of a pull on the handle, this shaft feels a little bit more stable, but it certainly brought that launch angle down a little bit. So what Fujikura have done with these is the tech is creating different torque values throughout the shaft to influence the feel of it, as well as then the stiffness profiles to affect launch and spin. So 2 great quality shafts. Fujikura have always had great quality materials, and the Speeder NX series, anything with the word Speeder on it is likely to be good quality. That's one of their top end lines. But what they now have is a contrast to the blue in this line for someone who's that little bit more aggressive. So have some interesting fun trying these out and seeing which one feels better and suits you better.